And so when I explained to him, when I went back and explained it to the general, well, he said, I'm sorry, I'll give you something else. Believe me, it won't have the same value, calorie-wise, but I just wanted to make you feel good, give you something, that was nice. And I'm sorry, I wish I could do something better, but that's all. I happen to have a surplus car of chili. I can't use it. It's not on the menu. I thought you'd do something about that. The man went out of his way to be nice, although he had no kinship with anything relating to the problem. Or whatever you want.
Now, we know that there were guns that were sent from Europe to Palestine. Do you know anything about that?
When I was in the Paris office, I was aware of the fact that certain shluchim would come in and would be involved in movement of vehicles.
With the help of chaplains?
I was informed that there was a chaplain in Marseille.
Who was that?
The name I was given was Hasselkorn.
Yeah.
I didn't see Hasselkorn for years and years and years, but so I was told, that Hasselkorn was helping. There was another chaplain also with the university. They had the American University in Marseille. Somebody else, I cannot recall his name at the time, but that footlockers of materials were down there. I understand the chaplain's assistant at the Paris office, the chaplain's office, the Jewish. I don't know. I knew him only in passing, and he would avoid me as much as possible because his job was such that he worked as a special assistant to Chaplain Dubois, who was the Christian chaplain. And I had another assistant, so that I was sort of stepping on his feet. We didn't have the same office, we didn't share the same office, but we knew that he was making movements in motion, and the CIC came to me several times to ask me, is he your assistant? I was saying, no, he's the chief's assistant. I have my own assistant. But as I say, it was indicated to me, for instance, by the quartermaster, by the property officer up at the cigarette camps. There were cigarette camps, and fantastic amount of supplies were there. And the officer there indicated that every once in a while an ambulance is picked up from his dump. He can't understand it. They come in American uniforms. They pick up an ambulance to bring to Paris. He says, the ambulance never gets there. He says, Chaplain, maybe you can figure out. I'm told, that they're Jewish boys. So could you figure it out for me? So I went to ask, and I was told, don't ask. Just tell them to put a few things aside. We can do it. Now, you see, the reason I say that is because all the kelim were collected at Le Havre. Anybody getting on a boat, so that when I was there were stockpiles up as high, 20 feet high, of weapons. Unbelievable, the amount of weapons. Especially machine. A man was allowed to take a gun home with him. But automatics, that is automatic equipment, machine fire equipment, was not allowed. And there were just stacks of them piled way up there. And they used to have to put it away. And the stuff would keep disappearing.
And you don't know anything about who
Well,
did it?
we knew simply that men who said they were Czech officers, who had joined the Allied forces, were involved in the movement of trucks and tires. Fantastic amount of trucks and tires kept going that route. And we know the trucks didn't go empty. I met the Czech officers, and they were Jewish. Now, where do you find Jewish Czech officers? I can't tell you. But I did not ask further because I knew these are things that you don't know. You don't simply have no comment to make. I want to indicate to you also that outside of Salzburg was the most infamous place at all that the Jewish chaplain had something to do with, and that was a place called Maxglan, Maxglan. It was right near the Mercedes plant. When I first walked in there, this is the place where I found the trunks full of human hair, gold to the teeth, the talisim, some of them shot with holes in them and blood stains on them yet. All of the menorahs and the various tashmishik dusha that they stole, that they were ready to sell. I found one day I was standing on a charter for the city of Vienna. The charter itself for the city that had been handed down from centuries before. This is the kind of place it was. This is also where I had the bar of soap made of human, it had human grit in it, that was later handed over to the military was part of a separate investigation completely. But the Jewish chaplain was instrumental, first of all, in making sure to protect this, that it did not disappear.
When was this?
I think we're talking now 47 winter.
The winter of 47, you found this place? Nobody.
I didn't locate, no.
No.
It was part of the quartermaster compound.
Right. And
Nothing was said too much about it. I understand that the various representatives of Israel knew about it and were trying to negotiate about it. The idea was, as I was told, that they wanted to melt down any of the valuables or be able to sell any of the valuables. And then a commission came in to start handling this. The military wanted to make sure that the stuff didn't disappear and that they were the proper authorities for handling this. So at that point I stepped out of it. But for a while my job was simply to visit the place, make sure that everything is intact, to report anything which may look as if it's not correct. When the shluchim came down from Frankfurt actually, then I had no more to do with it, and the matter was resolved. But as I say, when I went out now, Jewish chaplain was for instance, there's a place near Halayan, I can't tell you the exact spot, someplace I have some photographs. We found human teeth, we found a cemetery. It was part of some kind of an oil refinery built in the side of a mountain. There were concentration camps that no one knew very much about. Small camps. We talk a big branding camp, but they were work camps where there are cemeteries galore. These were made out with crosses for the Italians after the war. Many Italians died there. And Jews, someplace I have some pictures of it. But we found parts of human teeth and other things still lying around unburied. And the chaplain, as a chaplain, my job was not only to tell the military, but to get them excited about it and make further explorations in the area, to bring in CIC people, to find out if they could find evidence as to who ran the camp and find out from local area people what happened so they could pursue it further. So it was important, otherwise they would just be buried as just another place where people died and nobody would know more about it. There were even tubs over there that was alleged that there was inhuman treatment carried on in this area. But again, we did not have the evidence. All we had were simply the remains of what was left over. Another thing with Jewish chaplains, I used to run a mincha service in Dachau. When I was later changed to Munich, I used to run a mincha service.
When were you in Munich?
I was in Munich. See, I had 2 tours overseas. My first tour ended in 49. Then I came back to the United States. Went to Korea, came back, and then I went to chaplain school, and went back to Europe again. When the Hungarian revolt, 56.
Right.
I used to run a mincha service outside, right near the wall, because we had a stockade at
in
Dachau.
56.
Right.
Yeah.
Dachau was also a stockade,
Right,
American stockade.
Yeah,
So I always used to run a service over there and invite Christians to come, just a mincha service, just to stand there and pray. I'd be surprised how many tourists would walk over. They'd see a prayer session. They would always want to do that. Now, another thing, the services were held at the Burgerbrei. Now, Chaplain Dicker can attest because my predecessors had arranged this, not I, but I followed through on it afterwards. That the services at Friday night and Sunday morning were held in the same room where Hitler stood on the table and fired shots into the ceiling when he had von Hindenburg, the first march that didn't work out right. Remember when they marched in Munich and then the police dispersed them? This very room was given by the military to the Jewish chaplain to be used for religious services. And the highlight used to be after Aleinu, I would tell everybody, now let's lift up our eyes. They look at it, and the new people especially would lift up. I say, those holes were made by Adolf Hitler when he planned Lahashmid, Laharog is called Ayhudim, and we're sitting here singing, we sang Lachad Odi in the same room. You didn't need any sermon after that. They would just look at the holes in the paneling.
This service was for
Jewish personnel. But visitors would come through the building. They would always visit this room, which became a memorable room. But my predecessors are the ones who really set it up. I simply followed through with it because it was a very meaningful experience. And then every month we had a tour of Dachau arranged by the Jewish chaplain's office. So we did this through the Red Cross. So many of the tourists would all want to hear the Jewish chaplain on his visit what do you call it, the Jewish tour of Munich.
Now, let me ask you something about your involvement with Aliyah Bet. What took place there?
Well, my involvement was very limited in the fact that I only related to certain people.
Fine.
And I related directly to Bronislav Teichholz. If there was somebody important, a shliach that had to be taken care of properly, in other words, properly received, or whose presence had to be notified to the military in such a way that the man would not be disturbed. When I say disturbed, not harassed. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to harass a person or to deprive him of his ability to be in the Jewish, in the American sector. Mm-hmm. The job was to simply notify them that so and so is a shliach, or is not a shliach of Israel, but a shliach, a representative from an organization. No shliach just came in as a shliach. Mm-hmm. That is among the ones I met. Right. The ones I met came in, wanted to negotiate, wanted to get a few privileges, wanted to make sure that they'd be represented. They came in with a certain type of, I called limited credentials. Mm-hmm. And so that my job was afterwards to talk to G5, see what we could work out. Mm-hmm. And it was always done in liaison through Teichholz, who spoke to Arthur, or we'd meet at Teichholz's house. And I must say the military knew about it because I was under surveillance all the time. Mm-hmm. And if I went to meet the Russian counterpart in the international zone, I can also tell you that I was not only under surveillance, but photographed and even recorded at times. That's how sensitive things got. There were several important personalities that were gotten out of.
Mm-hmm. But with your help?
I was part. I say I'm only part of the help.
Yeah, well, I'm interested.
My part was simply to ascertain, is this person really the person we're talking about?
How did you do that?
How? By going back into the DP, among our DP mm-hmm. representatives, mm-hmm. who knew the man from way back. A certain professor was going out, I recall in Vienna. Mm-hmm. Is he really that professor? Mm-hmm. Is it maybe somebody else who took his identity? Is he really the man, the Jewish man? And then how are we going to set up for the man to go out? Now, we would not tell these details to one party. We'd talk to somebody else. Now, there's a man who, I don't know if he will speak to you. His name is Mann, M-A-N-N. Mr. Mann knows some of this information in depth.
Where is he?
Mr. Mann is in Washington, D.C. And he can be located, it's hard for me to remember his first name right now, but he can be located, if you will see Rabbi Clavin in Washington, D.C., Rabbi Clavin, at the synagogue on 16th Street, and tell him you want to get in touch with somebody by the name of Mr. Mann. You'll find a personality that knew Mark Clark and all the others. Totally on a different plane. Mm-hmm. We're speaking of...
Will he be able to help me with the chaplaincy?
To a great degree. He knows the background in intelligence.
Okay.
Which is a very competent thinker in this field.
Okay. Now, it was only a chaplain could do that type of...
Only a chaplain could do that kind of liaison.
Mm-hmm. Any other aspects of this?
You're talking of the Aliyah?
Yeah. In other words, you were the one who...
There were many times where people came through and had documents, papers that had to be put away, safeguarded. They were afraid, they had no place to secure them, where they would come to the office and ask, could they please be put away in our safe, or put away in such a way where the man would be protected. This was taken care of. There were certain shluchim, religious shluchim who needed, as you say, bread and water. They needed a place to sleep for the night.
And you could provide them where the JDC could...
If the JDC did not have a place, or some place miyuchad, that would fit for the man. I lived at that time, I lived in the Zieglergasse, in the 7th Bezirk, and in the Lechtenfelder Strasse. These are well-known streets. They play a role, which was an American billet. Well, the man would come by, go to sleep for the day. After all, I'm working all. The man would go to sleep for the day and leave his documents, papers, whatever he had over there. Fine, leave it, no problem at all. He could take off again, and that would take care of. There were many shluchim who had trouble, for instance, trying to get into certain DP camps because the hanhaga of the camp was not a religious one. Mm-hmm. In other words, they tolerated you. Come in, you're a religious shliach, fine, we'll accept you. Mm-hmm. But we are not motivated that way. We belong to another party. I would never enter into any party relationship. I said the only party that I had a personal relationship was Batar, because I certainly believed in giving them every staunch support I could give them.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps we should go into that aspect of Batar.
Well, I think the Batar did a great job in trying to discipline the camp, wherever they were. Mm-hmm. For instance, they had the Jewish police group. You may have heard of that. This was quite an organization by itself. But the Batar had a discipline to enable men to train, to have a bit of a backbone. For instance, we were accused that up in the Bindemichel, in Ebelsburg, see, Bindemichel later, a camp moved and it became Ebelsburg. The greatest mistake I made, by the way, as an American, because as an American, I was asked to lay out a plan for this camp for the G5 section. So I came up there as one who was supposed to be on the know what the Jews want. So fine, they gave us the plan for this place, and when we got all through with kosher kitchen and shul and everything else, I said, now we'll call it Camp Mogen David. After all, as a Jew, Mogen David, I figured fantastic. So the guys started to make up a big, one of our, personnel, the local Austrian personnel started to make up a big Jewish star. We were going to put it up because the Russians have red stars on their bridges. Everything's red star, red star. Mogen David, blue, beautiful Mogen David. And I had a riot on my hands. The people refused to move. And one of my chief opponents was Wiesenthal. Why? Because the word Mogen David, yes, Simon Wiesenthal, because Mogen David was the badge, of disgrace, the Jewish symbol. Here I thought it was going to be terrific, and the Americans thought it was wonderful. General, it's wonderful. He promised he'd show up for the dedication.
Who's this general?
At that time, General Keyes. He'd even come by and show up for the dedication. And then I find out that we made a boo-boo because it was later called Ebelsberg. But they would not have Mogen David, no Jewish star on top at all. His remark was, if you put a Jewish star on top of this camp, his remark to me was, Wiesenthal said to me, what kind of a teva did you do for me? You took down the barbed wire. He couldn't see to it, and these were living quarters that could be rehabilitated. It was all done with slave labor, and this was supposed to be SS barracks, for near the Enns River. Very important to us because people that came across the border needed Ebelsberg as a processing place in order to go down to Salzburg. But these are things which easily are rectified and all that helped out. But again, getting back to the Bricha, it's fantastic of the dedication that the Bricha men had. They would come in, disappear like a shadow.
Did you help them in any way?
Help them with items that they required. They needed clothing to give the people that they had brought through. They needed a certain sense of security that is not to be identified, but simply to be left alone so they could continue with their operation. They were not molested. As far as my vision of the thing, they were not molested. They were taken. It was understood they were doing a big job. All we had to do as a chaplain is to assure the military that they were truly shluchim and not involved in criminal activity using the border, or they were not Russian spies. And now I must say this, please, because I must immediately say that at no point did I ever identify anyone as a Russian spy. But the military wanted to make 100% sure this man is here on religious business or Jewish business, and it's Jewish business.
Now, do you think that if the chaplains hadn't given the assurance that they did, that the army would have stepped in?
I think that they would have been molested to a far greater degree, and I think the harassment would have caused more hardship. Because with all due respect, the Army was hypersensitive. And the Army did want, I speak, as I say, you're marking this on a tape, but the Army did want to have assurance that the man represented something that was strictly kosher and above board, and if the man was important enough, help us make an appointment with this man so we can talk to him. Because the Army wanted to make sure that maybe the man has something to say that they should be interested in knowing. It's a two-way street. I was never present at any of these meetings, but there were times when I was asked, would you kindly give a message to so-and-so, so-and-so. My job was to send my assistant, and I didn't get involved at all, to a certain, and say that a certain man, I'm trying to remember the names of some of these, a fellow named Maggot I had from Vallejo, California, a few others. I had a fellow named Nyadius, who was a Greek who was married to a Jewish girl from the Warsaw Ghetto, who was a man who understood the language and knew how to get around. But my assistants didn't play a big role, except for services and to take care of messages properly.
Fine.
And then the message would be given in the Frangasse or to Teichels. Somebody would like to see him. Now, I don't tell you who, because I think it's not right to say who would want to see him. Mr. Mann can give you more information in depth on that. But the American...
In other words, the Army, you think, was using some of these people from Bricha to...
not using them.
Well, I mean, no, excuse me.
Not using them. I would say getting acquainted in order to...
Get information from them as well.
In order to work out an assurance here that if we have something that we want to accomplish, It's a two-way street.
I see. So there
No, I didn't say that it was a one-way street or the Army wanted to get something,
so
certainly.
there was a collaboration, you think?
I
between
think
the
there
two?
was a coordination
Mhm.
rather than collaborate. I don't think it was collaborated
Okay.
because they had nothing to do with, their programs didn't gel as one program.
Yeah, I realize that. But
It was simply a coordination activity. We have things we're trying to do, you have things you're trying to do. Now, what they talked about was none of my business.
Fine.
I never was at a meeting between the two.
Were you involved in any way with Jewish Agency?
Well, but only with their leadership who came in and wanted VIP treatment, wanted to meet with certain military people
You
there.
could facilitate.
Very easily. As a matter of fact, in the World Zionist Congress, many of the refugees wanted to get there. The Jewish Agency representative came in and said the Sochnut
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that the people would come, so I took them as my assistants. I took representatives of the refugees and said, "You're my assistants." And I ended up in Basel, Switzerland, without a room myself, and finally went to sleep, I think, in Rosenberg, who was the deputy chief later on under Shapiro of the religious ministry.
Alexander Rosenberg?
Not Alexander but another Rosenberg, who was the deputy to Shapiro, Oliver Shalom. Anyway, I remember that with a smile because I had no room. I finally ended up sleeping on the floor of his room as a thank you for bringing in. This is the time when Cantoni of Italy came through with some other people. I brought in my group.
What about UNRWA? Were you involved with UNRWA in any way?
UNRWA more, yes.
And
Let's see, I don't remember even now who the UNRWA man was. I think Squadrelli was up in
what is your
Frankfurt.
impression of that relationship?
A lot of well-meaning people. I was not overly infatuated with UNRWA. I thought it was a necessity. It was an international type organization. I don't think it was focused toward the Jewish needs. I think the Jewish people got a fair shake, as you say, from them. But it's like anything else. It was a part of our organization, and it helped Jews. But it didn't go into depth as to the character of Jews or the religious persuasion of Jews.
Do you remember any incidents in particular where you were involved with the UNRWA workers that might be of importance?
A lot of UNRWA people were British people that I came in touch with. And they were nice, very polite, very exacting, but it's a strange thing. Some of them, in their curtness, were very good. People loved them. For instance, up at Bindemichel, Jewish people liked the camp director, the UNRWA man. He was very straight and very honest, and they needed it because even though Jewish people had their own little circles, for the front office they wanted somebody who looked fine in the eyes of the government inspector and everything else. You needed somebody who was above board.
A good image.
And he was a good image. I must say, with all due respect to UNRWA, it gave a good image. But UNRWA was very impotent in pushing the military to do something. You see, that's where you always had to go, to push the military to do something. Get the
Whereas
pressures.
you, as a chaplain, could push the military.
And you could push UNRWA too by sitting down and chatting with them. You see, it could be misread by people on the outside. They didn't know this. But when you're good pals, you call up an UNRWA man, you say, look, they need a few more calories, or they need, he said, I haven't got it, but the guy needs a pass, he wants to go someplace, will you take care? You need a synagogue, can't you separate it? I need a place the women can't wash in the same place. He take care, Rabbi, don't worry. They were good that way. I want the mikveh, for instance. He said, you need a mikveh. They build it. He said, I'm not going to ask them where they got the money. If they build it, I'll let you have it. He gave me a building, so they built the mikveh.
So do you think that the JDC workers also obviously dealt with the UNRWA workers, but do you feel that you were in a better position to get things done from UNRWA?
Better position to get things... I wouldn't say better to get things done through UNRWA. Let's put it this way. I expected more from Joint. I absolutely expected it. And I would get infuriated when Joint said, we can't give a supplement of kosher stuff. Sometimes he didn't have it, plain English. But I used to be quite perturbed. And I can't blame them. In other words, I had a right to be perturbed. On the other hand, I had a right to feel. Many of the UNRWA representatives were not religiously motivated. I mean, they were there as a humanitarian effort, as Jews, and had nothing to do with religious motivation. If I told him you need yarmulkes, he said, I need food. If I told him I need talaisim, he says, I need something else important. I need medicine. So he was right. And I felt I was right. Some of them were fantastic diplomats of the Joint. And I say there were some others who, like any other organization, were worms in the apple who didn't do anything.
Can you relate any incidents with the JDC that of particular importance?
When I needed wine for Pesach, 1946.
I mean, aside from religious aspects.
Oh, religious aspects?
Aside from religious.
In my dealings with them?
Yeah.
As far as movement of people or dealing with people?
In any other way aside from the religious aspect. In other words...
Well, I would say that with JDC, the chaplain's word The chaplain became, as you say, the rabbi for JDC. This I must say, that he was automatically adopted. I'm talking for myself
Yes.
now. That I was sort of the rabbi to them. There was no local rabbi in the community. There were rebelach.
How did you help the JDC?
By explaining what were absolutely religious needs, so they could be confident on what they got was for religious purpose, and they would take the rabbi's word. He's, to be honest. If they wanted to get something out of the military, they'd say, "Chaplain, come on along. We need a certain amount of supplies. We have to buy from the military. We want you to go along. We want you to underscore it." And this became, you became part of their team. And the military accepted it because you had a certain right, just like Caritas with the Catholics would have a priest come in, or the Catholic chaplain. When I would come in, the local, especially the local JDC man who was out in the boondocks, he at least had support because I could pick up a telephone and call headquarters Vienna, while he had to call his JDC man up the line, which was very difficult, very costly, and sometimes unrewarding.
All right, because I'm going to start walking to City Hall.
Okay. How would you characterize the role of the chaplains during this period of time, 44 to 48?
44, 48, I thought it was the greatest challenge any rabbi would ever have in his entire lifetime. If you ask me a better question, why did I become regular army?
Yeah.
Because I felt as a rabbi to go back to a pulpit and just serve a handful of people as being the religious leader or whatever it happens to be, in no way at all would have in it what I call the enjoyment of working with people who didn't hire me, but who felt I was trying to do something that gave value to their lives and their survival. And I'm not trying to say this as a firma tzaddik. I'm trying to say that it was a source of inspiration. And the greatest comfort was to walk in someplace and to have a bunch of Jewish people salute you by standing up or by saying, "We welcome you. You are the rabbiner." And you felt you did something in life. I look back upon it as something very, very great. I don't mind to say that when I got the Mordechai Ben David Award from Yeshiva University, I treasured it because Eleanor Roosevelt gave it to me. When Eleanor Roosevelt came to the Salzburg Festival in the early years of 46 through 49, the general said to me, "Rabbi, I want you to take her one night to the Salzburg Festival." To me, this is something to live with. This made life something. And then the great people that came through, the great people of Israel, at that time, who were just refugees themselves.
But what about specifically the role of the chaplain? How would you characterize that?
The role of the chaplain? Difficult thing to say. The role of the chaplain was one where his faith became he became a living faith. It wasn't cloistered by one little synagogue or one little house. I must only add, there was nothing as great as a chaplain. For instance, in New Palestine, we had a wedding outside under the stars, and refugees are all walking, and suddenly you're living you're part of a long, long history.
What do you think that would have happened if the chaplains hadn't been there?
I think they would have made it, but I think the struggle would have been more difficult. I want to be just as melodramatic. That the chaplain's presence enabled a struggling Jew to hold out just for a minute longer, so he could get to where he was going. It made him feel for a moment that he had a friend, and when he saw the American rabbi, as many of them would come up and kiss my 10 Commandments on my lapel, they would kiss it and say, "Is that an Americanatake?" They couldn't believe that you were an American. To them, this was America.
And you were the first. You were the first that they had seen.
First that they would see, and they couldn't get over to see a soldier walking around with 2 tablets, 2 10 Commandments on his lapel, walking around, talking Yiddish, and you're going to daven, and you're going to need this and need that. And he's a soldier, and he saw Goyim saluting the rabbi. To him, he felt this, only the Rebbeinu Shalom could come and do this otherwise. And that's what made it. He didn't get any promoted for it. You got in trouble all the time because they would suspect you. Say, "Rabbi, what do you know?" For instance, once I was supposed to have gotten 10 carloads of sugar. Who the hell ordered 10 carloads of sugar? Some refugees used my name. They were trying to make a big deal. 10 carloads. The general congratulated me in the morning. He said, "Rabbi, you're the richest man around here now. You got 10 carloads of sugar. Where the hell did you get the sugar?" I said, "I haven't got any sugar." Somebody pulled a deal. We laughed. But the whole town knew, even the newspaper. Rabbi Lipshutz got sugar. I don't deal in sugar. But you see, the infamy made you famous, the infamy, because then they knew right away, and we waited, and we found out who got it, and we made a deal. What did we do? Make a deal with the JDC. Otherwise, it'd be confiscated by the Austrian government, so they would buy it and pay the Austrian government. I didn't get into all of that afterwards, but it was enough for the military on top to get a good laugh out of it and enjoyment. Okay, Rabbi, stick with it. You know what I mean? Make off you own it. Make off you own it, because we got to find out who really did it, and then we don't want to lose it. So, you know, don't worry about that. The joint will get a hold of it.
Do you feel that the role of the chaplains during this period has been over-dramatized?
No, it's been underrated. Over-dramatized? The role?
Well, the role and particularly the role of individual chaplains.
I think that a lot of them deserved a lot more recognition than they ever got for what they did. But of course, they were only part of a total big picture. Israel was the big picture, and they were just a little piece of it. But I think they certainly deserved more recognition for what they did. There was just a certain charm, you see, in seeing a rabbi in that image, which the world had never seen. A rabbi was a rebbe, and here they saw a rabbi as a soldier, and I think that it played a great part in the United States in accepting him, and for the goyim to accept him, and the goyim to understand that he's dedicated to a Jewish thing. For goyim to know, I need a plane, I got Jewish people, they need me, I got to get out there, like with the Hungarian refugees, I got to get to the border, I got a requisition, you know. They let you, they wanted you to do it, and they gave you every help. For instance, Operation Safe Haven alone is something which I shall never forget, because it was too big, it was too fast, it was too fast. And by that time, of course, with the State of Israel being born, you know, you were a VIP. You were doing big things. And they didn't say you were doing it for a foreign country. Mm-hmm. You were saving people. So that's the important thing.
Excuse me. All right, the question is whether you have anything to say now about the relations between the Army and the DPs, whether the role of the chaplains to smooth relations between them.
I think the chaplains did an awful lot to help out. Specifically, the black market problem.
Okay.
Jews got a very big black eye, especially in Munich. Now, I'm not saying any one Jew, but they got a very black eye. The Brichai used to be over there. Everybody was in the Mehlstrasse. That's the famous street, M-E-H-L, Mehlstrasse. I was stationed at that time in Vienna, but everybody knew you go near Mehlstrasse. That was where they had the riots. That's where our friend Lavazer, you know, made a famous reputation by jumping out when the man wrote the letter about Hitler bleibt treu, Adolf bleibt treu, a very famous incident where there was a Jew got shot by Austrian policemen. But there were many people who thought of Jews only as black marketeers. And it became difficult, most difficult, to try and tell people that they're not all black marketeers. They're black marketeers like anybody, like any place else. Nobody looked at the German black marketeer. Nobody looked at the Austrian black marketeer, because he had a Maximilian someplace and a Bubby in a farm someplace else. He was able to schlep and dray. A Jew was visible all the time. He lived on the street. Whereas the Germans were able to do things. It's their country.
So what did you have to do?
It was important for the Jewish chaplain always to be able to indicate that you cannot take these few people who distort the law and indicate that all Jews are merchants and all Jews are rich and all Jews. The same old anti-Semitism began to creep its head up again. As soon as they said Jews, as soon as they said chaplains, the head of the black marketeers, you know. It became like Yud Zis, that the Jew is the court, how should we call it, arbitrator and intermediary who deals in all of these nefarious schemes on behalf of the nobleman, in this case being the military establishment, and the chaplain, he is the liaison man to these people who are ruining the economy. Nicht gestiegen, nicht geflogen. It didn't happen that way. It's unfortunate that there were Jewish people involved in some vice problems and opened up bars and things like that, but that doesn't relate to the Jewish problem. That wasn't because the Jewish chaplain was there. It was the Jewish chaplain, on the other hand, who used to go, in my case, I used to go to Munich, I used to meet some of these people and tell them, please, go out of this business, go to Israel, go someplace else. You're ruining the whole image of Judaism. You're spoiling it forever. The little bit of kindness that we're getting now and a little bit of old kindness that they owe us, why do you blemish it? Well, Rebbe, you know, they became involved. As you say, a dollar wants another dollar and one crook meets another crook. And they became involved. It became a sickness.
What about stories with Rabbi Lavazer? Was there anything in particular?
Oh, I thought that Lavazer was a Yiddish Talmud Chacham, first of all. I must say it all due frankness. And he was untiring in his ability to want to do something. And he had a good common sense, and he had a very direct approach to the military. I want to help, you know, my people. And he doesn't know anything else. He sounded like a real a real religious leader, making his demands. And frankly, he was already an old-timer when I met him, and I was the neophyte, and we were both working together. But I must say, he took me by the hand, come on, I'm going to show you my health Eden. And as I say, he was a religious man who was religiously motivated, and...
Are there any stories in particular that you can remember?
Really not, I say to somebody. It's so difficult to think in negative terms. Sure, I knew of chaplains or rabbis who could have done a little bit more. Of some, a question up in Berlin, a chaplain, I don't want to mention the man's name, I don't think it's fair to him.
Yeah.
Maybe he was immature, maybe he didn't realize the importance of his presence in history. But he could have done more and didn't. There were other chaplains who were very GI about their presence and only worked for Jewish GIs, that's all. They were sent by the United States Army, they were going to only do a Jewish...
Could you mention those?
Again, I cannot recollect. I could later. I could do it as if, let me think, I could measure it properly. But there were others who did what we call perimeter. As long as a man did do a negative job, I felt he did a positive job. But there were some who were what we called, religious thinkers who only did what they had to do, and that's all they got paid for. And they, vayom, vayokom, vayilech, that's all. He did his job, served, and went away. He didn't bargain for this. But there were so many avenues of lonely people that had nothing to do with Israel, lonely, lost people after the war that would come to you and, Rabbi, what should I do? And I got a daughter someplace else, and I got someplace else, and I don't have any money, what to do? And I forgot another role. The chaplain was the counselor. They trusted him. He was the joint.
More so than the joint?
Yes. You see, Hayas wanted you to go to a certain place. They would come and say, Rabbi, they want to send me here. Can I go? Should I go? Should I accept it? Falach, help me, talk to them. Maybe I can go a little faster. Or go to the council. I need a paper for the council. Tell them that I need a little bit of help. Well, to a chaplain, you had to know what to write. So you wrote a paper for a man. The mere fact that you gave him a piece of paper, you see, the main thing in Europe, you need a shtickle protectia. Mm-hmm. And the word protectia is so important. So that if you told him, don't worry, I'll call up Jerry Coleb of the Hayas, all of a sudden, Jerry Coleb. And I call, Jerry, I'll see you tonight at the house. Jerry, what are you going to do with this guy? Got a religious guy, he wants to travel. Give him a hand. Come on. You know what I mean? I can write a letter to an organization for him. All right, Jerry'd say, okay, don't worry about it. Oh, let me handle it. So this was the shtickle protectia the man had. The chaplain was his friend. I wasn't joint. They couldn't say that I'm holding back his rations. They couldn't say I'm shipping him to Australia, even though he doesn't want to go, that I'm taking away his chayuna, that I'm sending him to Israel. He should go ahead, as they used to say, at that time they were afraid to go. After all,
yes, right.
Great fear to go. What should I do? Don't worry, I get in there, help me. Why don't give the man courage? So that the chaplain really played a role as a religious counselor to be trusted to no end. And this was the mandate. If I told him it was right, he said, right. Azir Beis, that's a good, then that's all. That's fine, Rabbi. Fine.
How many people would you say came to you? I mean, a large percentage of people came to you with these...
A huge, vast, I'd say they used to be sitting outside, those who could get through the door with
They saw the
MPs.
joint as being very impersonal, and you were the
No, joint was sometimes very technical. They had to be. Joint was very straight in its operation. Yeke style. Very well organized. This is a compliment to the joint. Mm-hmm. But if you went to the rabbi, at least maybe you could help me a little bit. Maybe you could. Yeah, maybe you could find where did he stick my papers? My papier. They don't find my papers. Go to the consulate. You go to the consulate. You talk around. You talk to immigration officer. Please, I need some help with the guy. You come back. You tell him. Then you gave the man the strength to be able to wait another month. Otherwise, going out of his head to find out what happened to him. Now, it's no different than to a GI where you go to the chaplain, because why? I don't order the man around, I don't give him his orders, I don't send him home. But he comes to me and says, hey, I need a promotion. Will you bug the guy on top, or the sergeant doesn't like me? Do something. I would tell you very straight. There was never a time in the United States Army when I couldn't help get a man transferred or reconsidered if he had merit. By simply going and explaining the fact that we can avoid a problem or make a better GI or do something with great credit. I remember an incident in Vienna where a Jewish GI threw a bottle at a Russian in front of the Russian headquarters. And he shot back at the Jewish GI and he hit him. But I want you to know something, that within 48 hours the Jewish GI was no longer in Vienna. Because there was a private meeting and it was agreed that it would be in the best health of this Jewish kid. If he wasn't around there anymore, the Army can be a very lovable institution without waving a flag. It can be a very lovable institution. It's made up of human beings. And you have to know how far you can go to negotiate.
So you were the intermediary.
And the counselor.
Okay, thank you very much.